There we go. All right. And so where we left off, right, was we kind of did a Boolean through those, kind of windows, right? And one of the things you can, of course, do is go in here and delete these polygons, right? So I can just always go in here, 3 for face mode. I could select these, right? Left click, shift left click, right? Shift left click. You could, of course, use circle as well if you want to. Q toggles through those. If I wanted to move these forward a bit, I can, of course, to make that a little bit thinner. And, of course, delete, right? So remember, when you hit delete, it brings up your delete menu. And we want to delete faces. And you notice that I've created my own kind of quick key for delete faces because you're going to do that often enough. Just like for deleting edge loops properly, where it takes the edge loop and the vertices out, I'd use dissolve edges, right? And I set that quick key to control delete. These are not the default quick keys, though. So remember, you have to right click. And in this case, I've got change shortcut available. But if you have an assigned one, you'll see assign shortcut. And you basically just click on that, and then you just type in your key, right? Shift, delete. There we go. And of course, it deletes those faces. We kind of have a proper kind of hole for the window there. Now, in this case, I need to do a Boolean again, right? And I'm going to do that a little bit more times because we're going to make an arch again. Make it a little bit different, though, for the doors, a little bigger. Maybe give it a little bit of kind of an inset flow around it. So we'll kind of do it slightly differently, but it'll also be a great opportunity to practice the making of the arch again as well. Which, remember, we saw actually for making the room. Now, remember, if you don't want to see that faceted shading on your modeling, right? Remember, object mode, right? 4 for object mode. I've got the room selected. I think maybe I'll actually wait till after I do these Booleans, though. But in this case, I select the room, right? And then, of course, we can go to our add modifier. Now, you do have some cool add-ons out there that do some neat Boolean stuff. There is technically an add-on called Bool Tool, which is pretty cool here. I want to show you the modifier because it's great to know the default. Also, the modifier does give you kind of that ability to move the Boolean shape around a little bit to kind of see what's going to happen in real time if you want to see. So in this case, we'll just go to Boolean, right? So when you go to add modifier, it's towards the top because it's Boolean, Boolean. And we apply it. You see it there. Kind of turn that little square on. Now you pick the object, right? We can click on this and you'll see that there's cylinder 2, which should be the other ones, right? So it should be the other ones. Let's see, triunion or difference. There we go. Remember, you can always turn the visibility off for the other shape, right? So you can kind of see the different options there, right? For how it's going to Boolean that shape through there. Remember, you do have some kind of neat options there that are available for doing this work, right? You can turn the eyeball off or on for your cylinders. Of course, you can see how there's different kind of Boolean shapes there that we can pick. We'll pick that new one, right? And just the eyeball kind of turning it off and on, right? You will notice, though, that if I kind of hit W and move, let's grab the originals, or the Boolean shape. If I move those and then I turn that off, you see how it's actually interactively adjusting that Boolean up there? That is the benefit of using a modifier, right? So keep in mind that you can actually kind of do that. It's kind of a neat effect, right? But you can see that Boolean, the whole point of the Boolean is to be able to cut this shape out, right? Now at this point, of course, I could click on the base model. I could go right here to the little V right here, right? There's a little V. Apply. And now you'll see that that's actually kind of for real Boolean. Now, in this case, it didn't keep the other sides. That is one of those things, if you want to, you could just kind of go in here to 2 for edge mode, double left click, shift double left click, shift double left click, right? And you can kind of grab these little edge loops. So shift double left click, shift double left click. And you can always, of course, extrude these border edges. Kind of move it out along the, in this case, you see how kind of the plus moves at a slight weird angle. So oftentimes, you can just kind of click and drag, or maybe start to drag it out a little bit, move it over. something like that. You've got other options like extrude along normals. Technically, we could extrude individual. You see there's plenty of options in there. In this case, though, kind of a simple little bit like that. Maybe pull them down just a little bit. But really, we're just kind of trying to get to see booleans, right? And how those booleans will kind of work to allow us to cut these kind of window shapes out. So kind of neat, kind of interesting. Good to kind of see those and how those work. All right. So now, of course, I can go to 4 for object mode. And if we want, we can get rid of these original cylinders, right? So I can go to the actual outliner here, and I've got the visibility turned off and on for them, right? So, of course, we can keep them, but if we don't want them, we can just select them in here, delete. There we go. Usually make sure your cursor's in the outliner for it to delete. And now you'll see we've got our window set up there, right? So remember, you can apply modifiers kind of when you're done with it, right? Otherwise, if it's still there as a modifier, it's active, right? You notice how I could kind of move the Boolean shape, those arches around, and it actually would change where the hole would be cut out, right? So that's what's cool about modifiers being active instead of applied, right? Is that they're still working. Once you apply them, it's kind of like you finalized it. It's like, okay, I'm done, right? At that point, you don't need the original shapes anymore. If you were to adjust them, it wouldn't adjust the holes anymore. So remember, that's applying modifiers. And now we've got those set up. Now at this point, we really want to kind of create our doorway, right? So we'll kind of get to see this all again here. So what I'm going to do is I'm in 4 for object mode, right? I can go to add, mesh, cylinder, right? Because we saw that last time. That's how we kind of made the, that's how actually we started the room off, right? The room itself was kind of an arch that we then extruded some other parts off of. So I'm going to go to add, mesh, cylinder. Now the default, right? Because it creates a cylinder right here. You can see down here in the bottom left corner, there's the add cylinder option. We could open that up, and you said we could actually tell it how many vertices we want. I'm fine with the default 32 we've been using. Remember, though, it's always a good idea to use an even number that divides by 2 into an even number, particularly if you want to do this. Because if it's an even number that divides by 2 into an odd number, then you're not going to have an exactly perfect kind of half cylinder, right? It's going to kind of like create this really squashed V shape on either side, depending which polygons you want. So it's particularly when you're doing this, you want an even number of vertices that divides by 2 into an even number. And 32 divided by 2 is 16, which is an even number, right? But that's the default. The default 32 should be fine. Remember, we like to turn this around not in object mode. That way we don't have to worry about kind of clearing or applying all transforms, right? That would kind of reset. It's like kind of like Maya's version of freeze transforms. You could do that. It's not that hard to do, but I don't want to worry about it, and it's great to kind of show you the controls here, and just to get you guys to understand that you can manipulate the polygons inside of an object without actually manipulating the object itself. It's kind of weird to say that, but it's kind of true. It's better to think of an object as kind of like an invisible box with polygons inside of it, and you could modify those polygons without modifying the invisible box that we call the object. So in this case, I can hit 3 for face mode, right? 3 for faces, although it could be any of the edit modes. Remember, your mode's right up here. We have quick keys. They were on our quizzes. They're written up on the board. So hopefully at this point you're starting to kind of memorize those quick keys for those. But remember, there is the buttons right up here. And of course, I can hit E for rotate, right? Remember, they're all right here, though, too. And I can left-click drag on the red because this time I want it to be on its side this direction, not this direction. And once I start to rotate it, you'll see that the bottom left corner, that little button that pops up that we've seen and talked about a bunch of times already for like bevel, even inset. We even saw it just a minute ago, right? It's kind of a small button, right? Because there's a very bottom kind of dark bar that covers the whole bottom. And when you have rotate on, you'll see it says select, box select, rotate, call menu, box select. But there's a little smaller box kind of right above it that's kind of almost floating by itself a little bit. That'll say the name of your tool. In this case, it says rotate. You left-click on it, it opens these options up, and one of them is your angle. It's the very top one. So I can type in 90, And now we can see that it's rotated to be exactly 90 degrees. Now I'm going to hit W for move, and I'm going to move it out. And you'll notice because we're moving the faces, that center, right, that orange dot is staying right on the center of the world. And usually that's what you want. If you want your mirror modifiers to work kind of across the center of the world, that's good, right? And that's often, not always, often, a lot of the time what you want anyways. So we're trying to really kind of get you guys to understand that you can move the polygons, the vertices, or edges without actually changing the center of the object itself, or even its rotation, right? We'll kind of delve in that a little bit more, talk about it a little more later on. All right, so in this case, I'm going to hit R for scale. Now remember, if you grab the white circles and left-click drag, that's uniform scale. It scales all three axes at the same time. Middle mouse button, when you're using industry compatible, also does that. I'm going to scale it in on the green because I want it to not be quite as wide or as long. And of course, what we need to do is we need to kind of cut this in half. So what I can do is I can go to Vertex Mode, right? 1 for vertices. Remember, 1 is your quick key for Edit Mode Vertex, but it is Edit Mode. And then there's the buttons here. And of course, what I could do is I could grab this vertex, kind of right in the middle, and then shift left click on the vertex right across from it. Right click, right? We've started seeing this a lot more lately. Right click. You don't have to hold down your mouse button, just right click. And it brings up the context menu. We've often seen it in object and really a lot of the time object mode, although we've seen a little bit with vertex or curve context mode also. But you'll notice you can go to vertex context mode. You can go to face context mode, edge context mode. And we'll actually see those tools more and more as we go on, particularly when we get to our second project, quarter 2, our spaceship. Right, we're gonna delve into this stuff even more. This is just meant to be like our beginning project, right? So right-click vertex context menu, and there's one called connect vertex pairs. And technically, you could do both sides at the same time, but you know, sometimes it's great to just show it to you multiple times. So left-click. Remember, Shift always adds in Blender. Often it subtracts too. Usually, Shift will add and subtract selections in Blender. I think one of the big ones that uses Control for deselect is Circle, but a lot of the times it'll be Shift. So remember, Shift most of the time, but maybe occasionally Control for deselect, right? Once you get those down, it's pretty easy to kind of figure it out and get used to it. And then, of course, right-click to bring up the vertex context menu. Connect vertex pairs. And so remember, this is what we did for the room itself, and then for the arches for the windows, right? So really, the room is mostly building the arch, right? And then we threw booleans in and a bit of how the snap tool works, right? In this case, and connect vertex, right? So you can make an edge between vertices. Now, in this case, I can go to 3 for face mode again. Now, if you want to, you can always just select the faces, kind of bottom faces, and delete them. Faces. And then, of course, box select is the default usually for select tool. Remember, Q toggles through this, though. It's right up here. The very top tool is your select tool. Q is the quick key for it. Q for quiz, right? If you see it's kind of a dashed orange box shape with a little cursor inside, that's your box select. If you do Q again, you see how it's the same icon except the dashed orange shape is a circle. Then you have one that kind of looks more like a freeform shape, lasso. And then there's Tweak. Tweak is actually one of my favorite tools in Blender. Not terribly appropriate for the modeling we're doing right now, right? We'll see the Tweak tool a lot more on our spaceship. Our spaceship will see the Tweak tool a lot. Not really appropriate now. But remember, Q toggles through these. Also remember, any tool in Blender that has a little kind of triangle, a small little triangle at the bottom right corner, if you hold down your left mouse button on it, the tools are there, right? So you can actually kind of pick what you want. But Q toggles through those. In fact, any one of these that has that, if you just keep hitting the quick key, it'll toggle through, right? So any tool that has those little triangles, if you just hit that key again, it'll go through there and kind of cycle through them. And box select, remember, is just left-click drag, right? Left-click drag, and it drags a box out. Whatever's inside that box, or whatever that box touches, will get selected. You could technically use this with X-ray shade to grab everything also. So if I was to go back before those, you notice if I do box select from this angle like this, see how it doesn't grab anything it can't see? That's where X-ray shade, which is right up here, right? It's kind of, these little kind of guys right up here. These are some of your viewport visibility options, right? This can show you some of your gizmos in the viewport. This will show you your grid. You can actually turn your floor off, turn your axes off. These are your different shading modes, wireframe versus shaded versus EV. We'll see that a lot more when we get to texturing. But there is this kind of one in the middle here that's kind of, it looks like two boxes that are kind of see-through that overlap. That is X-ray. There is a quick key for that, Alt-X. You'll notice that X-ray mode allows you to do a box select that'll grab everything it sees. So that's a great way to be able to kind of select everything with the box select. Briefly turn X-ray on. It's a toggle, Alt-X. But it is also the button right up here. But of course, you can just manually select these or get rid of them. I know it's a lot, right? But we need to keep introducing some new stuff to you so you have a better understanding of Blender, right? You're not going to be masters in Blender at the end of this semester, right? But try to get you a good foundation of a lot of core tools. Of course, delete for faces. There we go. And then, of course, we go to 2 for edge mode. And we double left click on this border edge, right? Once you delete a face, the edges that are left there are only connected to one face. That's what we call a border edge loop, right? Extruding edges like these right here, those are connected to 2 faces. If you extrude those, it's going to have 3 faces connected to an edge. That's generally what we call non-manifold geometry, non-manifold. That's usually problematic. That usually will make a lot of your tools not work, like bevel and loop cut won't work. If you're going to use a subdivisional surface modifier, which we'll see on our ship, our spaceship, right? That's not really going to work well with it. Generally, non-manifold geometry is a bad idea. But border edges, you can fill holes on, right? You can make new faces from it. You can extrude border edges. In fact, we're going to build our spaceship by extruding and bridging border edges. But in this case, I just wanted to do new face from edges. And that's right-click. You said we're seeing this right-click a lot more. We've seen it a lot the last few lectures. And it's in a couple of the most recent videos, right? When I right-click, it brings up edge context menu, right? So now we're in edge context. And you see there's a tool right there, new face from edges. New face from edges. And that makes a polygon there. I can then hit 3 to convert those to face mode. And then, of course, we can extrude down, right? Extrude tool, good old extrude tool. Grab that yellow plus to bring it down. And now we've got kind of that arch again for our doorway. Now, in this case, I feel like my door is probably a little bit big, so I'll just Control A to select all. R for scale, middle mouse button just to bring it down a little more. W for move, kind of start to get it kind of lined up here and overlapping. There we go. Maybe R for scale again. Remember, if you left-click drag on the white circles, that'll kind of scale it down. All of it, right? Uniform. W for move, I can grab that blue arrow, kind of make it pretty low down there. There we go. You kind of just always like to have that bit of overlap there. All right. Now, if you wanted to keep a bit of kind of trim here, right? This is where the way Blender handles its booleans can kind of be cool, right? Particularly using the boolean modifier. You can technically keep the original shapes, right? You can do the boolean and then kind of keep that original form. So in this case, I feel like we're only going to do one door. I don't think we need a door on both sides of this hall. So what I'm going to do is, of course, I'm going to go to 4 for object mode. I'm also going to save scene as, save as. Call this version 3. There we go. I'm going to go back to the room itself. Blue wrench, right? Because that's where our modifiers are at. Add modifier, boolean. Then we can go to the object, right? It brings this up. Usually I always kind of like to turn that on because it's the edit mode feature. So I can go to object mode here and I could pick that new cylinder. And if we turn the eyeball off, we can see there's that nice cutout for it. Now, one of the cool things is if you'll notice that you can't really see it without visibility off, right? So make sure to select that. Remember, you can move it up, then turn the visibility off, and you see how it kind of shows it through there. Technically, you can go as far as even kind of controlling if this is going to show as wireframes or not. There's like some cool stuff you can do with visibility, right? Or viewport display, like technically make it wire. That way you can more actively kind of visibly see the Boolean effect. But that's kind of one of those things where you don't have to do that, right? Kind of you know where you want to put it anyways. But it's kind of neat to know that you could do that, right? That there is in the orange box, this viewport display stuff. But in this case, we've got that Boolean. And of course, I can go back to the original room. Now, like I said, right? Any modifier can be applied manually from the modifier itself, right? There's that little V right here. It's kind of next to the X. If you want to get rid of a modifier, you just click on the X and it gets rid of it. But right next to it's a V pointing down, like a normal V, right? If you click on that, you can apply. Remember, I actually have that modifier tools add-on, right? Remember, it's one of the add-ons. If you type in, if you go to search and you type in MOD, you'll see there's one called Interface Modifier Tools. That gives me these as a shortcut, particularly if you have multiple add-ons or multiple modifiers. But the apply is right here as well. It's just that it's kind of a one at a time thing. We hit apply, and then even if we go back to this original one and move it up, see how it no longer affects that opening? So this is one of those neat things about that modifier is that once it's applied, your original shape is still there and you can do some modeling to it. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of create a little bit of a frame around this. So I'm going to go to 3 for face mode. I'm going to left click on that face, shift left click. Remember, we have an inset tool, I. But it's right here, right below extrude, right? And I could left click drag on that yellow circle. And remember, that scales it, creates new geometry like extrusion would, but it also kind of scales it in, but it keeps that border the same thickness, right? And then, of course, I can extrude back a little bit. And then if I want, I could basically come in here and just get rid of what I don't like, right? So I could left click, shift left click, delete faces. Left click, shift left click. I'm actually going to grab these as well. Shift left click, delete faces. Probably get rid of that bottom too, delete faces. There we go. And if need be, I could just go in here and I can grab kind of these edges on the bottom, right? This edge. Shift left click, shift left click, shift left click, shift left click, shift left click. Technically, there is a flatten tool inside of some of the loop tool things you've turned on, but I think we're just going to scale it for this one. R for scale. And if I scale it down on the blue, it'll kind of give it 0 scale, which will flatten it. Now remember, the scale will have its own options here as well, resize. Open this up, and you see how the z-axis is 0.04. I could type in 0 there, and that'll make it perfectly flat. And then if I want to, I could always just double left click to select that edge loop. Move this back a little bit. And of course, I go to 3 for face mode, Control A to select all. I can move this back a little bit. And we've kind of got a bit of a trim around this, but also it kind of goes out into the hallway. But once again, inset, right? We've seen that a couple times before. Seen it on our table in particular, right? Pretty useful, though. Pretty useful. And those original Booleans stay, right? The original shape. So you can actually do the Boolean and then modify that original shape if you want to do a little more with it like this, which I figured for the door to be good. And of course, last but not least, we have that faceted shading. Remember, that's right click, in object mode, right? So 4 for object, right-click, shade smooth. If you want the shading to be a little bit smoother, remember you can always go to that green triangle, normals, auto smooth. You can play with the angle as well. But I feel like this is fine. Keep it sharper. We'll maybe put bevels on those later on. In fact, I'm going to do that right now, particularly on this. 2 for edge mode, right? Edit mode, edge mode, double left click, shift, double left click. And we can turn our bevel tool on. Bevel that a little bit. And then, of course, we go down to the bevel options down here. Give it at least maybe 1 segment. And then, of course, we go 4 for object mode. There we go. Got a little bit of bevel. And, of course, I can go to the room. Right-click, shade smooth. In particular, you see how the shading gets really weird there? So that's why we really want to go to the green triangle. Open up the normal section, turn auto smooth on. You see that helps a lot, right? It smooths what usually you want it to smooth, and then kind of the stuff that usually you want harder edge, it'll keep. But that's based on this angle. Start turning that angle up more, and you see how it kind of gets rid of that. And there we go. We have the room. Save that, and I'm going to stop recording. There we go.